Hey guys, welcome back to the AC Test Kitchen Quarantine Edition. So like you guys, we have been social distancing at home, trying to flatten the curve, and we've been doing a lot of cooking because why not? So we wanted to keep the recipe ball rolling with recipes that involve ingredients that you might already have in your pantry. And we also wanted to take this opportunity to do a quick introduction to bread making. Breads are something that some people find unapproachable, and they really don't have to be. And this recipe I actually think is a really good intro into bread making. So today we're going to make a no-knead boule. The first thing you're going to want to do is take a Dutch oven with the lid on it. Put it in your oven and heat it to 400 degrees. You're going to want to do this about 30 minutes before you bake your bread. Let's start with why we need bread. So the reason that you need bread is to develop the gluten in the dough, right? It's what gives the bread structure. Why is this no knead, and how can that even happen? Well, in this case, what we're doing is we're taking less yeast than you would typically use to make this type of a bread, and we're letting time do the work for us. So we're going to let this bread rise for, at a bare minimum, 12 hours. It's better if you can go to about 18 hours. That would be ideal. And what that time will allow the yeast to do is eat all of the sugar in the flour and release the carbon dioxide as a byproduct. The bread will rise and the gluten will develop within the bread. So you're not kneading the bread in order to develop the gluten. That's the first thing. And the second thing is this is a really moist dough. Sorry, terrible word. Really moist dough. And that is going to go into a hot Dutch oven. And when you combine that wet dough with a hot Dutch oven, you create steam, and that's what gives you that nice crust on the outside. This is a super easy hack for bread, and you should have everything already in your pantry. So for this, you need about a pound or 3 cups of all-purpose flour or bread flour. You need 3/4 of a teaspoon of yeast, 1.5 cups of lukewarm water, and 2 teaspoons of salt. That's it. You're going to want to start, once you get your Dutch oven into the oven and warming, with 3/4 of a teaspoon of yeast into your warm water, and you're going to let that sit for about 5 minutes for the yeast to activate, and you'll start to see it dissolve. You can use fresh yeast if you have it. If you have fresh yeast, use about 1/4 of a teaspoon, but for this, we're using active dry because it was in our cabinet. So you are going to take your 3 cups of flour, about a pound. I would recommend getting a baking scale. It's the easiest way to make sure that your bread consistency is really predictable and repeatable. So if you can, scale about a pound of flour. To that, you're going to add your 2 teaspoons of salt, and you're just going to give that a little bit of a whisk to combine. And then we're going to make a nice little well in the center, and you're going to take the water that you dissolved your yeast into, and you're just going to add that into the middle. You could get really fancy and use, a stand mixer, but it's really not necessary, and you might actually run the risk of over mixing your bread, so maybe don't do that. And you are just going to mix this until a nice shaggy dough forms. It's going to be very shaggy. It's going to be very wet. Don't freak out. It's supposed to be like that. So once everything's incorporated and you have that nice shaggy wet dough, we are going to cover this in plastic wrap. And we're going to leave this alone for, seriously, 12 hours at a minimum. So if you want to do this the night before, it's not a bad idea. Another tip when you're letting bread rise, I would avoid putting your bowl on a stone surface. The stone is very, very cold. So if you do have a wood surface, that is the best way to raise your bread. You can also put this in the oven with the oven light on and the door closed, and that will create a nice warm environment. But for this, I do recommend that you use a piece of wood on your counter so that you do get a nice, slow rise. When your dough has taken its little 18-hour siesta, it will develop all sorts of little bubble spots, and that's how you know the bread is done. So turn this out, and it is a very sticky, wet dough. Take a little flour over top, and you're just going to want to flip this over on itself maybe 3 or 4 times. Just make sure your surface is floured, unlike mine, so that it doesn't stick. And then you are going to want to take the plastic wrap that you were using on your bowl to lightly cover this. And we are going to let this rest for 15 minutes. So once that's rested for 15 minutes, you're going to take the plastic off, and we're going to form this into the boule shape, so a nice round ball. And a really simple way to do this, again, you don't want to overwork this dough because the yeast and the steam in the Dutch oven are going to do the work for you. So you just want to take one corner and fold it in, another corner and fold it in, and keep going around until you get a nice circle. And then you can flip that over. Now, if you want to go the extra mile, you certainly can. Take your hands, pull the dough towards you a little bit, bring it back, pull the dough towards you a little bit and tuck that back under, pull the dough towards you a little bit and just tuck that back under. And then tuck your sides under just like that. Now, because this is a very wet dough, I recommend taking a bowl and a piece of wax paper and putting the wax paper over the bowl, and you're going to take your nicely formed sticky dough and put that onto the wax paper. Don't worry about it being smooth. It's going to be a nice craggly bread anyway. Take a cotton kitchen towel and drape that over your bowl, and you're going to let this sit for another 2 hours. Remember, I said this takes time, and you're letting the time and the yeast do all the work for you on this bread. So once that's rested for 2 hours, you will notice that it has at least doubled in size. So we are going to take our Dutch oven that's been in there for 30 minutes heating out, and we're just going to lift this on the wax paper directly into the Dutch oven and then back in the oven. And we're going to cook that with the lid on for 30 minutes, and then we're going to take the lid off and cook for another 15 to 30 minutes or until GFB. Break this up. And then lift this right out of the pan into your Dutch oven. Cover it up. And back in for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes of baking on 400, you are going to want to take the lid off. Oh, look at that. And put that back in for another 15 or 30 minutes until it's nice, golden on the top. Okay, finally, after all that waiting, the bread's done. So let's pull it out of the oven. Look at that. Nice, golden brown. Get a good grip on there. And lift your bread over to the cooling rack. You're gonna leave it there for about 30 minutes, and when you tap on the bread, it should sound hollow. That's how you know it's done. All right. let's have some bread. So this is cooled for about 30 minutes. I mean, look at that. It's beautiful. And you have that nice hollow sound so that we know it's done. Let's see what it looks like on the inside. So check this out. So you can see there's some nice bubbles in there. The yeast had time to do its work. It got a nice little fermentation action going because it was left out for so long to rise. She's gonna be pretty delicious. Super simple, really easy to make. I mean, there's no better introduction to bread making than I can think of. You just have to plan accordingly. Give yourself some time. So good.